Hello everybody, I'm Avian and we are here to do the next video of our How to Bank a Stardew Valley mod. This time I'm going to talk about the config menu because you see it a lot in mods, and I have one in my garden cottage mod, as well as the fact that we just finished our portrait video and it kind of leads into the config video pretty nicely. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to open VS Code. Okay. So your config menu typically goes at the top of your content JSON. I know I've briefly showed it to you in our content video, but we'll go deeper in for this one. So what you start out with is your format section. You want to put your, see if I can get the wording right on this, the version number of content patcher that is going to be usually the most recent, but if there's an update, you want to use whatever version that your mod works with, and then anything higher than that, is usually okay. So for example, if I build a mod at 2.3, which is what mine has been from the start, and there's another update or so, which there has been since I started creating this, everything from 2.3 forward should still work. Now, if I find an error and discover that the version needs to be the most recent version, or that error is going to persist, that's when I'm going to change this number to be the new number. But as my mod currently sits, 2.3 and higher is workable, which is why that mod is there. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to add this little ConfigSchema tag, and then you're going to have two curly brackets. You have your open bracket and you have your close bracket. Again, always keep your brackets in pairs. If you don't have it open and close, it's not going to read correctly. And then you want to put a little comma after your ending curly bracket, because that's going to tell your mod to go ahead and read the next section, and that the next part is a different section. My config is for setting portrait styles, and what you're going to do is choose this bit here. You can name what's in this wording right here anything that makes sense to you, as long as you use the exact same wording in the next section when you're making your instructions. So in this case, because mine is for setting the portrait style, and I wanted to be very clear to everybody what was going to change when they set these config settings, I named mine portrait style. And then down here you can see I use the exact wording for the instructions on what happens when a specific portrait style is selected. The next bit is the allow values section. So your values, you can give them names. You can go true, false. That again is up to you, but the allow values stays the same. And then you're setting your values here. When you set your values, you want a comma between each value because that separates them from each other. They're going to go inside your double quotation marks. Again, quotation marks always paired, one on each side. And then you're going to add a comma to say there's another section, another line to read. Your next line then would be setting your default choice. So if you had a true false, your default might be true. If you have, like I do, where each value corresponds to a different portrait style, my default style is the classic style, which is what's going to match the best with the other East Scarp mods out there. I also have my recolor option, which was when I very first made my portraits, I wasn't quite sure of what I wanted to do. So I basically took a vanilla character, swapped the hair, did some coloring changes. Wasn't like, it worked, but it wasn't the best I could have done. but when I went back to redo them, I didn't really want to get rid of the artwork, so I kept it as a recolor option to explain that. I also have a Fire Emblem style. So if you've seen some of my other mods, you know I've made some Fire Emblems inspired portraits. And to keep the theme running in case somebody wanted to use my Garden Content mod with the Fire Emblem portraits, that is an option. Which is why all my portraits are done in the way that works with the config menu. Your next section after your default is going to be your description, which is basically this description tag and then your quotes and then just a sentence or two about what the config mod is going to change. So when somebody goes to select their settings, they know what they're looking for, which I've basically just explained what I was doing with my config settings. So that is how you set up your config. Is you have this little section right at the beginning saying what your selection is going to be called, what the values you need are, what your default is, and then a description for anybody who might be changing the selections. Next, you're going to go into the changes section of your content JSON. And I always like to put my config settings right at the top of my changes because it's easy to find and they're right there next to the setup part of the config menu. You're going to put a log name for each one of your changes, and then it turns into the instructions for what happens when your values are selected. So in my case, depending on which value is selected, it's going to include a different portrait JSON. And I'll just show you real quickly. All of these portraits are set up exactly the same. The only difference is the from file asset that I've specified, whether it's from the recolor file, whether it's from my Fire Emblem file, or whether it's from my classic file. And these only get included when the corresponding value is selected. So I'm going to jump around here a little bit. So we'll look at this when statement first. So when the portrait style is set to classic, it's going to include the classic portrait appearance. When my portrait style is Fire Emblem, instead of the classic, it's going to put my Fire Emblem portrait appearance JSON. And again, when my portrait style is set to the value recolor, it's going to use the portrait appearance JSON for my recolor. And I've named everything to correspond with that. So it's portrait appearance, recolor, portrait appearance, FE, FE for Fire Emblem, portrait appearance classic. So that is my from file section. And that is just saying that we're including this from file. So your action is included in this particular instance. And then, yeah. You can do different instructions with your config menu. Most of the time, you're going to set it up to include a specific JSON, and then that JSON will have the individual instructions that you want. That's the easiest way to do it, but you could put different instructions here if you don't want to have different JSON files. I just found including the separate JSON files and having those JSON files have the different things to be the easiest for me. I have seen different options where somebody included a heart event for a rival heart in their config menu. So if you were a particular fan of a rival heart pairing, you could turn it on and off. I've seen like in lifestyle mods where they set a config menu so you can select which pairings you want to see additional events from. So for example, Marnie and Lewis, or if you wanted to see Marnie and Marlin instead, you choose your options there. I've seen in some recolor where on the fall, if you didn't want your fall to be so orange and you wanted more green colored grass with the fall trees. I've seen people set 2 different options there. Or you could choose the classic orange. It's really up to you. It's basically where you want to give people an option to make a selection on if they want to include part of your mod or a different part of your mod, or have something turned on or off. Some things I've seen too is for a mod that includes multiple NPCs that are romanceable, where you could choose the NPC you want to romance, but you could set the other NPCs 14 card events, for example, to more of a platonic version if you want to still see the events. Lots and lots of different options of things you can do with the config menu. This is just your basic setup. And I hope you found that information helpful. Again, if you have any questions, you can ask in the comments. I'll do my best to answer. You can ask your local modding community on Discord. I know the main Discord for Stardew Valley has some modding help, as does the Stardew East Scarp Discord, which is where I've done most of my learning. People there are amazing and friendly and always excited to help people learn. And I'm sure there's many other modding communities out there that'll be happy to help. I hope you all had fun and learned something new. And until the next video, I hope you have a wonderful day.